You know the story. A young man is sitting under a tree. An apple falls. It bonks him on the head. And in that one lightning moment, he figures out gravity and changes the world forever. Here's the thing. Almost none of that is true. The apple never hit his head. He wasn't a boy. And that flash of genius everyone talks about, it didn't happen the way you were told. Not even close. But the real story is stranger than the myth. Because if you pull on this one thread, the whole idea of how genius works starts to unravel. And you end up asking a question that should honestly keep you up at night. Was Isaac Newton special? Or was he just the guy who happened to be standing there when an idea that was already coming decided to arrive? Let's start with what actually happened. Because the apple was real. That part's true. The year is 1665. Newton is 22 years old, fresh out of Cambridge, and the world is falling apart. The bubonic plague is tearing through England. It kills roughly a quarter of London. The universities shut down completely. Everyone is told to go home and wait it out. Sound familiar? So Newton goes home, back to a quiet farm called Woolsthorpe Manor, where he grew up. No professors, no classes, no distractions. Just a bright, restless mind with absolutely nothing to do and nowhere to be. And here's what nobody tells you. Those plague years were the most productive 18 months in the history of human thought. Newton later called it his year of wonders. In that little farmhouse alone, he invented calculus. He broke white light apart into the colors of the rainbow. And yes, he started working out the laws of gravity. One kid, one farm, one pandemic, and the foundations of modern physics. So where does the apple come in? We actually know because Newton told the story himself. Near the end of his life in 1726, he sat in a garden with a man named William Stukely, drinking tea under some apple trees. And Newton, now an old man, said the idea of gravity came to him in exactly that setting. He watched an apple fall, and he asked a simple question. Why does it always fall straight down? Why not sideways? Why not up? That's it. No bonk on the head, no lightning bolt. Just an old man remembering a quiet afternoon and a question that wouldn't let go. But here's where it gets interesting. Because that quiet question was actually a monster in disguise. Think about what Newton was really asking. The apple falls down. Fine. But the moon doesn't fall down. The moon just hangs up there, going around and around. So why? Why does one object drop and the other one float? And Newton's terrifying leap was this. What if they're the same thing? What if the moon is falling too? What if the moon is falling toward the Earth constantly, forever, but moving sideways so fast that it keeps missing? What if the exact same force pulling that apple to the grass is the force holding the moon in the sky, and the planets around the sun, and everything, everywhere, all at once? That is the actual idea. Not that gravity exists. People knew things fell down. A caveman knew things fell down. Newton's insight was that the force pulling your coffee cup to the floor is the same force running the entire universe. One rule, everywhere. No exceptions. That's the apple. Not a fruit hitting a head. A single question that scaled up until it swallowed the cosmos. Okay? So now we get to the part that actually matters. The question in the title. What if it never fell? What if there was no apple, no tree, no quiet afternoon? Would we still know about gravity? And the uncomfortable answer is yes. Almost certainly yes. And pretty soon too. Here's why. Newton was not working in a vacuum even though he basically discovered vacuums. There was another man in England named Robert Hooke, brilliant and prickly, who was writing letters about how gravity might weaken with distance. In fact, Hooke and Newton wrote to each other about this exact problem, and Hooke later accused Newton of stealing the whole idea from him. They hated each other for the rest of their lives over it. There was Edmund Halley, the comet guy, who was so obsessed with the math of orbits that he personally paid to publish Newton's book when nobody else would. There were astronomers across Europe circling the same truth closer and closer, like the pieces were just waiting for someone to snap them together. And then there's the kicker. A German named Gottfried Leibniz invented calculus too. Separately, at almost the exact same time. Neither one copied the other. They just both got there, because the idea was ready to be found. Scientists have a name for this. They call it multiple discovery, and once you learn about it, you see it absolutely everywhere. The theory of evolution? Darwin sat on it for 20 years, and then a guy named Alfred Russel Wallace mailed him a letter laying out nearly the same theory, forcing Darwin to finally publish. The telephone? Two different men filed patents on the very same day. Oxygen, sunspots, the modern calculator. Over and over in history, the same discovery pops up in different places at the same time, from people who never met. It's almost like ideas have a season, and when the season comes, they ripen no matter who's standing in the orchard. So maybe Newton wasn't a wizard who was handed the secret of the universe by a falling fruit. Maybe he was the fastest, sharpest mind standing in a field that was about to bloom anyway. But wait, Before you decide Newton was replaceable, let me complicate it again, because there's a difference between the idea and the proof. Lots of people suspected gravity got weaker with distance. Hooke suspected it. Halley suspected it. But suspecting is easy. Newton did the thing almost nobody else on Earth could do. He proved it. With math. He built the entire machinery from scratch, invented new mathematics to handle it, and produced a book called the Principia that could predict where a planet would be, or where a cannonball would land, with numbers that actually worked. Halley once asked Newton what shape a planet's orbit would be under an inverse square force. Newton instantly said an ellipse. Halley asked how he knew. Newton said, "I have calculated it." He'd already solved the problem years earlier and just kind of forgot to tell anyone, so the idea might have been in the air. But the proof? The proof needed a specific, strange, obsessive genius who would grind on a single problem in total isolation for months. And that part might not have been inevitable at all. Which brings us to the twist I really want to leave you with. The Apple story is a myth. We've established that. But it survived for 300 years anyway. Why? Why do we still tell it, even now, even to kids? Because the story is doing a job. It takes something almost impossible to explain, years of lonely calculation and mathematical struggle, and it compresses all of it into one perfect image you'll never forget. A falling apple, a curious man, a flash of understanding. It's not a lie exactly. It's a doorway. And every one of us walked through it as a child and got a little closer to a very hard idea because of one piece of fruit. That's not weakness. That's the same thing those ancient humans were doing around the fire. Turning the truth into a story so it could survive, so it could travel, so it could reach you. Tonight. Thousands of miles and hundreds of years away. Oh, and one last thing. That apple tree, the actual tree, at Woolsthorpe Manor, it's still alive. It's around 400 years old, propped up and cared for, still dropping apples every autumn. Scientists have taken cuttings from it and planted its descendants all over the world. There's one at MIT, one at Cambridge, and in 2010, an astronaut carried a piece of that original tree up to the International Space Station. So a fragment of Newton's apple tree floated in orbit, weightless, in the one place where apples don't fall at all. Which is a pretty perfect ending if you think about it. The tree that taught us why things fall finally went to the one spot in the universe where nothing does. So here's what I want you to sit with. We remember the apple. We remember the name. But the real story was never about a genius getting lucky under a tree. It was about a scared kid, sent home from school during a plague, who sat alone in the quiet and asked a question so simple a child could ask it. Why does it fall? And then he did the one thing almost nobody does. He didn't let the question go. Maybe that's the whole secret. Not the apple. Not even the genius. Just refusing to stop wondering long after everyone else has gone inside.